Hello and welcome to the CSO Impact Podcast, where we talk to leaders in sustainability. I'm your host, Harald Neidhardt. I'm the CEO and curator of the Futur AI Institute. And in this episode, we show you a recording of the Ethical AI Salon in Davos during the WEF, the World Economic Forum, in January 25 in the Futur AI House that we organized for the first time. The speakers and the participants of the panels are Anna Gawlikowska from Swiss AI, Daniel Barcay, the Center of Humane Technology, Daniela Herrmann from Dynex Moonshots, as well as Daniel Erasmus from ClimateGPT. Enjoy. Why don't you first introduce yourselves? And then I see how it all complements each other. Anna, why don't you start?
Pleasure to be here. I'm really glad that you took up the Ethical AI initiative. Big pleasure to be here. I'm Anna. I am CEO of Swiss AI. And I have, recently I wrote a manifesto to myself, which started with a sentence that I feel a stewardess of AI. And stewardess comes from the word steward. We are stewarding the growth of something much bigger than ourselves. At this point of time and space, we are that generation. And I happen to have been in the topic for the last 15 years.
Well, Daniel Barcay from the Center for Humane Technology. You just heard me speak, so I will be brief.
Daniel Herrmann, serial entrepreneur and co-founder of Dynex, Quantum as a Service, brought to market in February 2024 with an ethical committee and ethic tech involved to uphold ethical integrity.
Daniel Erasmus, I run Erasmus AI and the makers of ClimateGPT, of which is the first foundational model on climate change, and we just launched model number 2.
Thank you for the short introductions, and why don't we dig a little bit deeper, and while we go back this way. Daniel was also a partner of our CSO award, and with the ClimateGPT platform looked at some of the sentiment data. Why do you explain it, just a couple of words, sentences, what is ClimateGPT doing, and then each of you can maybe introduce again, what are you as a service, what are you working on with the lens of the ethical AI which we're discussing today.
Super, thanks, Harald. So a couple of years ago, I was asked to give a presentation on the promise and perils of AI, a room much akin to this in San Francisco, with a great deal of discussion of the trepidations and perils that we'll see, everything from AGI all the way down. And I gave a pointed critique of the discussion there. And say the real challenge of our time is not AI, not at all, and I disagree with you on this, the task of our moment, but it is to deal with climate change. We are facing an entirely different world. And there's a narrow opportunity of action here. We should be aware that we're beyond 1.5 degrees already. And so we decided to build not AGI, but a task-driven AI system. It's a foundational model. It's not on top of anything. It's soup to nuts built. And we were in the fortunate position of having extremely large data sets. So 100 billion articles we have in our collection. So these are substantive planetary scale collections. And so we could take a subset of that and build a model to help accelerate our response, not to meteorological, so knowing that it'll be 51 degrees in the Maghreb in the next 2 decades, but human activity. So what do we do? How do we change our risk system? How do we change our reward systems? How do we inform CSO practice to engage with the world? How do we inform them about disruptions in supply chains? How do we inform and understand extreme weather? So a whole set of these tasks, because we are going to have to allocate between 100 and 300 trillion dollars on this project ahead, and we have to get much faster on this. So the existential question, much akin to your question that we ask ourselves, is what can we, as AI experts with planetary scale data sets, do to make this change a little bit faster, a little bit better? How can we be the superpower inside NGOs, inside this change? And that's the place where we think AI can make a difference.
Please. I'm so excited about what you're doing. So what you can give away.
So AI is for sure. So, for example, in Brazil, we're working in cardiovascular disease and AI enhancement with a university, one of the largest researchers in cardiovascular disease, because we are, bringing the two worlds together, AI and quantum. And I think that will be a huge shift for everyone who has a lot of data, who has a lot of information, who wants to we're building with Mark Buckley, for example, also for the foundation, Aloha's Foundation, we're building an Earth monitor for regeneration to then actually tap into the fundings of regeneration that need very precise scenarios, very calculated, simulated scenarios, which are today with computing just not possible to demonstrate. So we are super excited to engage with everyone in AI because I think it's kind of the next level of playground in computing. And in addition to everything what AI says, it's still very dear to my heart. It's also important that these children that are affected, that what we heard also now, they need to eat dirt, they need to be under the pine trees, and they need to be out there. So the techie world is important, as much as I love it, but it's still some things in the intelligence we cannot give if they don't exchange with Mother Nature.
We are at the pivotal moments in many ways. We are living in interesting times, as they say. Society has been reinventing itself over and over again, and history repeats. The only thing which changes really where we are is technology, and also externalities of that technology. It's really technology. So we have this thing in our hands. It's our generation. We started building AI alongside semiconductors 50 years ago. So we looked at where GPUs are going and how can we design the future systems of smart simulations in order to support some of the largest $1 trillion, in fact, flows of capital, which we will do once. So I've recently been to one of the Arabic states and they asked me a question. We have $1 trillion, how can we help you? And I said, well, you have $1 trillion. You are going to spend that $1 trillion. You will pour concrete. And you will be stuck with that concrete for several generations to come. How can we help you? So we've built a system with a bunch of ETH people for the last 15 years. It's a simulator of the world, but non-dual use, just civil use. I'm refusing cases where I feel that it can be misused. It's very powerful. It's very rare. You get a top-notch tech and purely directed ethical application. It's very rare. And I know how rare it is, and I know how difficult it is, because I've been doing it. This is how we get some good people around the table.
Daniela, how do you embed the ethical part in what you do? Because I think there's something there that you also did from the get-go in a system kind of approach.
Yeah, so one thing is for sure that we right at the first moment when we brought it to market, that was a strong push from our side, from the founder level side, to really have the ethical committee in place and implement ethical tech. So these are we have three elements, right? We have one, and then I'll come to your conclusion that you're having still with the dual use. So one, the ethical committee, when in our procedures, for example, when they quantum compute, and there is in the Cubo formulas a suspicion from our side in our systems that this is too complex, that this is something very suspicious, then it flags. If it flags, they get stopped and it goes to the ethical committee and gets taken apart. Part of the ethical committee is also ETH Chris Lubicum, by the way. That was a great supporter of our entire initiative. And we have then a very diverse also ethical committee that goes into that conversation. There are 2 layers of flaggings right now, and we will build that out even. And then there's another layer. I'm out of the sustainability space since 15 years, and I know how hopeless it is as well as hopeful. And the dual use logically is also, I'm clear about the dual use. So I asked myself, what do you do with things you want to actually include people to carry, right? And controlling, you always lose because they sneak, right? Left, right, and as you say, they have intentions, and these are often not the ones that you are really hearing. But what is also good is what we are asking is they need to encrypt their purpose on the blockchain. Yeah. And that client, whoever it is, has to forever immutably encrypt their purpose on the blockchain and also confirm their ethical principles. And that is something already we're experiencing that is catching people a bit by surprise, because I'm saying, I don't want a contract. I don't want you to sign. I'm not going to be complicated. But sign into the blockchain that purpose which you're telling me you're doing. And it will be forever there. It's hashtagged. It's not publicly in that sense. But logically, when there would be a case and they would say, Danny, what did you do? They actually wanted. You have a certain kind of, surprise mechanism that can play. For a brand, that action today with all, ecological is a big step to put something like that in there. And if they don't do it, they don't get this, what we have. It's as simple as that.
I want to go to Daniel, and then to you, Daniel. So if we take this as one company, amazing, which is going even another exponential in quantum and using AI or the ethical, put it in the blockchain. Do you know other systems, or how do we, not having this, let's say company by company by company, but is there sort of how do we take the slides and the ideas of the Center of Humanity or Humane Technology and make this maybe available? Is there an API into your brains and say, okay, this is how we, kind of scale this? Because otherwise every company has to kind of invent that thing because it's IP for each of these companies and so on. So how do we help each individual actions and help scale with the other 50,000 people who don't care about that?
Well, yeah, I'll try to be. It's a big question. I'll try to be brief about it, and unfortunately, we both actually have to leave in about 5 minutes. So, so again, our fundamental diagnosis, we're a bit of a Cassandra in that when we focus on a problem, it tends to be because it's stuck, because there's a big incentive pushing back on that problem. There's plenty of problems that are getting fixed by companies, by individuals, but if we see the incentives being aligned with that getting fixed, we don't pay attention to the problem, right? We tend to focus on the problems that are stuck precisely because we can see the weight of the incentives pushing back on them. And so our goal and our recommendation is that we figure out how to change those incentives. So what does that mean? There's three parts to it. There's public awareness. How do we all demand better? If 2023 we rang the bell saying, hey, this is an important conversation, 2024, AI was everywhere. It was every conversation, but it was potato chips. It was empty calories. There was no deep conversations about AI. There was just, hey, AI, right? It's going to change everything, right? And so 2025 is the year that we think the public needs to really have the deeper structural conversations about what needs to go right in our society, what needs to go right with our children, with our psychology, with our politics, with our business. Because if we don't shift those incentives within those systems, it will arrive at a much worse future than we could have had. So what does this mean for all of us on the ground? So sorry, that's one. That's public awareness. Policy. We work, knock on wood, with politicians in the US from both sides of the aisle, on the left and on the right. This is an issue that is above partisan politics. How do we make this go well? One, keep it above the fray. This shouldn't be a partisan issue. Two, educate policymakers on how do you level the play field well. So we focus at the Center for Humane Technology on liability, because liability is something that if you don't get it right, then it's very hazy. And both sides of the aisle can agree that if we have good competition, we need strong liability. So here's an example. Our head of policy, Casey Mock, came from Amazon, and he saw the tech playbook, which is if it's unclear in the value chain which tech company has the liability when something goes wrong, you can spend 5, 8, 10 years in court. And so why slow down? Keep rolling. Well, now with AI systems, is it the foundation models that are culpable? Is it the system integrators that are culpable? Is it the end users that are culpable? There's so much lack of clarity there that it's going to be used to hide real problems in society. So we just released a federal liability framework for the US context that makes it very clear when we think each of these parties is responsible, and how do you craft wise liability legislation so that the courts can handle this. And so that the general counsels of these companies will push back on their engineering teams that say, we need to rush this out to market as fast as possible. And so between the policy, the public awareness, and better designs, which I haven't had time to go into, but I don't want to spend too long, we can design these technologies better so that they produce less of the harm and elevate us as a society more.
So perhaps I will talk to the design. We have 10 years ago had a 500 million agents model. You know, you hear about agentic AI. We model every single person and their life cycle. So what is critical for me, which we understood very early on, is that we cannot make it non-GDPR compliant, because the thing will become very, very dangerous. So as you give birth to these AI structures, you need to ask yourself for what it can be used and what shouldn't be in it. So it's not only the use case, how it will be used by the users, but it's also beyond us and beyond our control. As we give a birth to some creature, it will keep on evolving. So what do we put into that creature and what we not put? And perhaps sometimes when we don't put certain things, it might not be as profitable. Because we, for example, chose not to put emotions. We could have been much more powerful than Cambridge Analytica. We don't want to do it. Because it's going to be too useful for things we don't want it to be used for. I've refused large projects regularly, which are in, for example, adding models of riots. I don't want to model riots. The moment we put riots in this thing, this is extremely dangerous. So as we build this future AI, we have to also guide it, and maybe commission helps. But as each of us individuals who are in the steering wheel, in any way, leaders, we have to ask ourselves farther generations questions of this AI. Where is it taking us and why? And one of the things I believe Switzerland is special in and might become one of the future solutions is that we are really GDPR compliant. And that's critical not to connect to our, IDs. Because the moment you connect to our IDs, these agentic systems are very, very harmful potentially moving forward. So the responsibility is always linked with finance, and particularly in high tech, it's so rare. And it requires really step by step. Not just once. Keep on going. Years. 15 years. Never give up. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have a couple of more minutes. You really want to run? Okay. Thank you. Let's have a little round of applause for these two, but I want to continue. How did you, or let's say what Anna just said, it's like, okay, she is working for 15 years, thinking about it and so on, but it's sort of one person, and you are the CEO and founder of your company, and it's like, okay, this is my moral ground, and that's what I'm doing. And you don't have, I'm assuming, but that's the question, why don't we have it? Well, here's the book, here's that one software, here's the API, and that's how I put it in, and then everybody programmer knows, oh, I want to put beep, you cannot program this. I mean, literally. So, but if, a founder leaves the company and say, oh, wow, cool assets, I buy that company, the CEO is out, and now forget the moral thing, gang ho, America. So how do we get to that? And how maybe did you put the system in with blockchain and so on? How do you think that can scale to, let's say, 15,000 other companies, startups doing things beyond just, hey, yeah, I read this book, I saw the movie, and so I don't want to do it. I don't want to be Cambridge Analytica. It's a personal question, but it has to be in the system.
I'm co-founder, not CEO. We, by purpose, said that I will not be CEO. So anyways, it's a little thing. We don't have a CEO. Important for us, I think, is the following. When you create deep tech and it's a mover or it's a shaker in the market, it's always a question, what's your motivation, right? What's your incentive, as we also heard, right? And it is really something that is also personal development, where you have to understand that when it is that you're gifted with some kind of good idea that can maybe go like a wave and spread through the ocean, you've got also that responsibility for that spread. And unfortunately, the culture in the last, especially 100 years of industrialization, if you look at war games, that I call the whole today competitive space. Competitive space is a pure war game. I'm a polymath investment banker. I was commodity trader. It's a jack, throw that stuff over, right? Those are tough grounds to play in. These are different ways to take decisions, albeit that I'm a little blonde in 164. And so I enjoyed very much to be with the boys in the room. So I really must say I had great times. But what I want to say is we need to shift entirely the competitive space attitude. Competitive space needs to be an excellent kind of capability of collaboration. You need to see synergetic fields of cultures that need to intersect. You need to have different informations of the little, let's say in India, someone doing something that we don't know that we can reach suddenly. You have to amalgamate the entire world, humanity actually into one. That has to be the vision. And now if you have something, an instrument that you can give birth to that has a relevance for that cycle, right, then logically you will not talk to someone who will go, hey, and when are you doing your exit, right? Because I had to answer, I'm not doing an exit. I said, what are you building then? I said, well, I'm building a company. I'm a company with history and responsibility. It's the next gen, right? That needs to be there, and you need to be also in your strategy. So like in our example, what we have is we have quantum as a service right now as an emulation with the ethical tech, etc. But we're building also a chip. And now you could say, okay, Danny, but once you have that chip out there, I mean, quantum computing is kind of a little bit the atomic bomb of computing coming, right? If you want. How are you going to do that, right? But also there, we strategically already know exactly that that chip is not going out of the system because we have a decentralized system with nodes, etc., to keep that and not for the power play. However, we later on put the governance over the system. It cannot be free of use, right? Meaning that would be end line. I couldn't sit here and say anything ethical anymore because it would be a complete crap story, right? Because I know exactly what's happening tomorrow. I know already now who's interested, which fields are interested, dual use, the military with all their drones and cyberspace playing around right now. But if it's for building hospitals, if it's for discovery of medicine, if it's for creating solutions for climate change, if it's for ocean health simulations, if it's for simulating actually to companies that I can show them now, hey, listen, you know what? This is exactly what you are doing because this is the correlation. We couldn't demonstrate correlations of cause, and now you can. That is really a great opportunity, and it needs to be accessible and available to everyone under these terms of ethics. And that's why we also gave out a textbook, for example, now actually today, and we have launched yesterday with India, because we're going to give 6 million people access to the computing course that we're developing so that it spreads very quickly, and in that course is ethical principles, partially to people that have never read about it in that sense, because why should I, if I'm studying quantum computing, actually read about ethics? But that's when you start change, right? I'm hopeful. I don't know if it will, it serves. I'm hopeful. But I think this is what has to happen. We have to change the entire way of how we compete. It's not anymore a killing system, and it has to be under the paradigm of ethics.
Great. I'm so honored to have people, among us that really think that deep and also in the future in a desirable way. And Daniel is also a full member of the Club of Rome, and so there's a sort of an ethic, morality embedded. What are your reflections of what you...
So, Harald, you kind of anticipated the direction I'm going to go. So, basically, come to this problem from the perspective of decision theory. So, and having worked for a quarter of a century in decision theory, being in some of the rooms, as you were informed, by those difficult playing fields as a polymath, you sit in the room with some of the smartest people on earth, making critical decisions with billions of dollars at stake and making mistakes, missing critical things. And a quarter of a century doing that, building global scenarios, we've always thought of our theory of change is situating deep technological innovation, because that's what we're talking about, within social contexts. And it's that dialogue of the social context with the deep possibilities of deep tech that's the really interesting playing field. And one can't just go too far on the one side or too far on the other side. And we've always tried to position change there. And so the question we ask ourselves is, having launched a number of initiatives in this space, was where are the high leverage points to accelerate this massive change we have to do? And what we found was the quality of information that people build their decisions on can be vastly improved by this class of technology. That's a different positioning from this technology than the creature in the corner that I can talk to, which a lot of the AI is positioning itself. Some creature in the corner or some helpful gear. With the CSO awards, the question was, these executives, they position themselves, they publish these reports, they have a great deal of internal challenges. And so sitting together with some of these executives, one asked the question of who here is planning for the world beyond 1.5 degrees? Because we're clearly, that's 2-3 degrees. And these are, single digit points, so multiple digit points of GDP will have to be spent on just risk. Just pure risk, not even transition costs or any of those things. So how does one, and so one could see the interplay of what they self-say that they're doing, the challenges that they face internally to tell the stories which we talked about, and then the ability of these AI systems to map planetary scale data sets and to say, you might not be aware of this, but there are these issues along your supply chain. You might not be aware of this, but this is how the world anticipates it. You might be aware of this, but those people over in Puerto Rico have solved these problems in that way. And so you're starting to create connections which are impossible before. You're starting to build inferences with these simulations. So yesterday we added, and we'll be doing that through Q1, about 500 million numbers to the model. So it grounds model responses into databases, and it'll include the CO2 emissions of every single asset on Earth, including later this year simulating capabilities. So, but it's not interesting to know that it's hot in the Maghrib. What's interesting to know is what does that mean for migration? What does that mean for food security? What does that mean? And how can we build the systems now already to anticipate and prepare for those changes? And so you see, I've shifted the discussion from the morality or the ethics of AI into an entirely different social context, which is the physical social context that we're about to inhabit. And that's an interesting place for us.
I hope you enjoyed this recording about ethical AI. If you are interested in other recordings and activities that we do either in the Future AO House or in the other events that we host throughout the year for Chief Sustainability Officers, please click on the link below. And I see you next week in the next episode of the CSO Impact Podcast. Thank you.